fall camp is on and popping. Let's whip around the country here a little bit, and there is no better place to start than Tuscaloosa, Alabama. A lot of opinions right now on Nick Saban, the new coordinators, who's playing quarterback. They run that ship a lot like Fort Knox. Not a lot gets out of there, but for the good people at Bama Online, get a membership there because they're going to keep you as much in the know as possible. Talked to some people close to that operation yesterday, and there is a feeling in-house thus far through fall camp that the approach on the offensive line is one of the more physical units they've had in a minute. Caden Proctor, if you remember that name, he's a 5-star offensive tackle that Alabama flipped before signing day from Iowa to Bama. They said he's making some noise. Now, how does he factor into the rotation this coming season? Still TBD, very, very early, but they like a lot what they have seen from him. This offensive line, if you've watched this show for any period of time, you know I wholeheartedly believe that is going to be the engine behind this offense. I'll talk about the quarterback. That's fine. We're going to figure out who that guy is eventually. But this is going to be what steers the ship for the Crimson Tide. I think Tyler Booker put it perfectly when he said, we want to make people quit. Like, that is the mantra. That is the thought process for Alabama offensively this coming season. Now, with great power on the offensive line comes great responsibility in the pass game. Shout out to Uncle Ben. That's basically what he was telling Peter Parker, because they feel like they have a chance now with how much they're going to run the football and how much they force those safeties to commit to the run game. They're going to have a chance now for more deep shots than they've had in a minute there in Tuscaloosa. So, with that being said, where's the wide receiver room at? There's good news and there's bad news. The way that we do it around here, we try to start with the bad news first. And the bad news is there has been far too many drops to this point within that wide receiver room. Okay, so you got to get consistent there. The good news is, and there's a couple pieces to this good news, the good news in relation to that bad news is you can work on that. You can get on the jugs machine. You can get with these quarterbacks, and that's something that's fixable. The real good news, though, is you have a ton of speed in that wide receiver room. Malik Benson is a JUCO wide receiver that transferred to Alabama. Pretty much everybody wanted him. He is thought to be the wide receiver one coming into this season. He's got great speed. He's got great size. You saw him put on a clinic in the A-Day. Like, he's going to be a guy they depend on this coming year, and they have been very impressed with him to this point. Now, defensively, it's tough to take a ton away at this point because the pads haven't really started popping yet. We don't have a ton of like scrimmage intel for you right now, but Tresman Marshall transferred from Georgia to Alabama. They said he looks the part. When we talked to Dallas Turner at Media Days, he was talking about Tresman Marshall kind of being that experienced presence at the linebacker position. They also are feeling pretty good about Deontay Lawson. They think he looks good out there so far. And so the reason why I talk about the linebacker group, anytime you talk about Alabama historically, like those teams that went and played for national titles and won the SEC, you think about those linebacker units. I mean, they were just bullies. Like that was the heart and soul of the defense. Now, you have to have the defensive line to go with it, and I think Alabama will. But having this linebacking group have good returns at this point, I think is encouraging for Alabama as a whole. I think when you talk about the buzz around fall camp, that's usually what I like to get the best pulse for when I talk to these people close to their operations, close to their respective programs. The buzz at Alabama, from what I've heard, is very much so all business. And there's some degree that says, well, okay, that probably is true because Nick Saban is, process oriented. We're keeping everything internal and not worried about the external. So I'm sure that they hear a lot of the external noise about what Bama's not going to be, and they're falling off, and Saban this and Saban that. But I think if you're not going to let yourself be affected by the rat poison, the good stuff, you got to take that same approach to the negative stuff. So for Saban and Alabama right now, they're a team that I think is very much so we're going to learn about come Texas. A lot of talk about that quarterback position. I wholeheartedly believe you should let this thing go until week 2, until that game against Texas. Because first week of the year, you got Middle Tennessee. Play whoever you want. Play all 3 of these guys. Heck, play some freshmen, because you know what that does? The more data you can get on these guys, it probably helps you evaluate them. Also, it keeps Texas from being able to focus their game plan on one quarterback. Bama right now, they can game plan for Quinn Ewers. They know without a shadow of a doubt he's going to be QB1 for Texas. Texas can't say the same about Bama. So something to keep an eye on. That's kind of the vibe right now at Tuscaloosa. We will obviously keep you in the know as we go forward. Let's go out to the West Coast now. USC last year in the Pac-12, headed the Big Ten next year. The thing with them that I think is probably most encouraging for USC fans is whenever you talk to people that have seen practice thus far, there is a very real sense that this eye test at USC, just the sheer size and strength that you're seeing on the field right now from USC is very, very different than what they've had in the past. Like, this is now the first full year they've had under their director of sports nutrition, Rachel Suba. She's done a great job there so far. And everyone says this during fall camp. Everyone says, wow, they won the winter. Wow, they've looked so much bigger than last year. And some of this you kind of take with a grain of salt. But I'll tell you this, I have friends that played for USC in previous years. I have friends that were actually within that locker room and were with the previous nutrition plan. And they told me straight up, they're like, listen, man, we have friends that have transferred to other schools, transferred to schools in the SEC, transferred to schools in the ACC. What we get fed at USC, it's not bad, but it is nowhere near on par with some of those other schools. So to hear that the nutrition program now has taken some strides and the weight program is matching that and they're seeing those real gains and looking different in the trenches, I think USC fans are very encouraged to hear that because they know defensively that is going to be the bread and butter. You got to stop the run this coming season. Did a lot through the transfer portal. Bear Alexander, Anthony Lucas, Jack Sullivan, a transfer from Purdue. They feel like this defensive line is just different. I mean, it's just head and shoulders better than it was a season ago. We'll see what happens when we start playing games, but they're very excited about where they stand with those guys from what they got in the transfer portal. Now, speaking of the transfer portal, they also love Marshawn Lloyd. Marshawn Lloyd transferred from USC, the other USC, University of South Carolina, to Southern Cal. And he was a dude that was banged up a little bit last year, but I'm telling you, he was the dude that contributed a lot for South Carolina when he was healthy. He's a really strong back, gets downhill, and there's a feeling that he can be for USC this coming season what Travis Dye was for them a season ago. So expect him to step in there with Austin Jones, and I think they'll be a pretty lethal 1-2 punch at the running back position. Now, fall camp, you also wonder, how are the young guys adjusting? Are the young guys making some noise? Are those true freshmen going to get any burn at all? Well, we've talked about him a fair amount on this show if you've been tuned in. Zach Branch, true freshman wide receiver from Bishop Gorman. Every single person you talk to around USC says the exact same thing. Dude is built for this. Dude has picked up on the speed of the game extremely quickly. He's got tons of energy. He's got tons of ability. Like, he will contribute for USC in a very real way this coming season. Now, is he a guy that has 100 catches and over 1,000 yards? Like, we'll see. But I promise you, he will make a lot of plays for them this coming season, whether he's on special teams, whether it's picking up a critical first down. He's going to be a guy that I think sees a lot of action in the slot, so watch out for him and his just big playability. He was a top 5 player for us here in the 2023 cycle, so that should say something. Braylon Shelby and Sam Green, 2 players in the defensive line that they think are going to play for them this coming season. I mean, you add them to the mix with the other transfer portal adds they have on the defensive line. They have made a very conscious effort now to be better in the trenches, and this was, I think, the most interesting thing that I heard from USC practice. There is a very real score being kept across fall camp. I mean, fall camps across the country. You finish a practice and you kind of have a feel like, hey, defense won that one. Or, hey, offense had their way today. The feeling at USC is that the defense won the last 2 practices. Let that sink in. The offense with Caleb Williams and with all the freak show wide receivers they have and the running backs I just told you about, the feeling is the defense won the last 2. So from a USC fan, that's really encouraging. The buzz around USC last year was optimism. Hey, we got a new quarterback. Hey, Lincoln Riley's here. We're going to score some points. We're going to have our way in the Pac-12. A lot of optimism. This year, it's a lot more quiet, and quiet in my mind equals confidence. Like, they don't have to talk about what they're going to do. You already saw what they're going to do. Caleb Williams got a Heisman Trophy sitting up by his bed right now in his Los Angeles apartment. Like, you know what they're capable of. And USC feels like they have very much so everything they want to accomplish in front of them, and they have all the pieces to get it done. So USC now, they're going to be a team to be reckoned with. Obviously, all good returns so far right now out of fall camp. Now let's go to the ACC, and they're in the ACC for now. And we talked to some people over at War Chant. Get your membership at War Chant. They do a phenomenal job to keep you in the know for all things Florida State. The buzz around them right now is it is a very professional feel. which if I'm a Florida State fan, that encourages me, because my question going into the year is, okay, the spotlight is bright now. You won 10 ball games in 2022, haven't had this much excitement in the Mike Norvell era at Florida State. Like, how are they going to respond? And to hear they're just taking it one day at a time, very much so about their business. Transfers are meshing well. We'll talk about them here in a second. That tells me this team's psyche to this point in fall camp is in the right place to accomplish what they want to accomplish in 2023. A guy that's name has stuck out in a very big way so far, Keon Coleman. I talked to somebody close to Florida State, and they said, listen, I knew Keon Coleman was good. We knew Keon Coleman was going to be a player for us here at Florida State. But from what he's done so far during fall camp, they said he is just a different level right now. Johnny Wilson has also had a good fall camp. There's some murmurs and some feelings that Keon Coleman could potentially be the bell cow for them in the pass game. Like, they love what he's done so far. He had multiple big-time catches. Like, he had a 60-yarder the other day. He's eating greedy. So to have a guy like him meshing so well at this point in fall camp, someone else told me, like, hey, listen, if I didn't know that Keon Coleman was a transfer, I would never have known. I would never have known he hadn't been with this team for 3 years. To have that talent, hit the ground running, to not get spring football, and to have him fitting so well, like, that is very, very good news for the people in Tallahassee. Jordan Travis, got to talk about the quarterback with what he's going to be this coming season. And the biggest note on him is he just looks really in control. Like, I don't have a ton of questions about his physical ability. Can he make the throw? Is he going to be a good athlete? Like, we already know that. We already saw that last year. There's no question marks there. The question is, how does he handle, like we said with the team, how does he handle the pressure, and how does he handle all the buzz around Florida State? There were some people last year that felt like maybe Jordan Travis, when push came to shove and things weren't going Florida State's way, he's a competitor. He's going to get fired up. He's going to show some emotion. And from your quarterback, you don't necessarily want to have negative emotion come out. And so far through fall camp, he's been very steady, and they've seen a certain energy from him to where everyone knows, hey, we got a chance because we got Jordan Travis. Not a thing where we're rising and falling with Jordan Travis and how he's reacting to things. There was one play that I think Jared Verse just blew up the other day during a team drill. And instead of being frustrated with blocking or frustrated with a wide receiver or whatever it was, Jordan Travis, very cool, calm, collected. Next play, let's roll. Here we go. You need that from your leader. I'm excited to see Jordan Travis do that this coming season, because the ability is not a question. I don't even have a question about the mental response to things. I just think that's the next step you take as a leader of a big-time college football team, which Florida State's going to be. Talking about some transfers, Fentrell Cypress was a guy that transferred from Virginia, all ACC caliber kind of cornerback. They expect him to contribute this coming season. During spring, sounds like he showed some good signs. He did some good things, but he just looks much more comfortable now, having 15 practices under his belt from the spring, now having a full offseason with Florida State, now getting into fall camp. Like, they're really encouraged about his progress so far. He's going to be a guy they depend on this coming season. They're excited about the defensive line play. Jared Verse, I mean, you know what he is. There's no question about Jared Verse. They're optimistic about Darrell Jackson, transfer from Miami, being able to play for them this coming year. We'll see what happens there, but they just feel really good about where they are from a depth standpoint and a talent standpoint. We talk about it a lot. College football, emphatically a line of scrimmage game, especially when you get into November and guys are banged up. And when you get into, the postseason, those conference title games, the college football playoff, like that is what decides games. So Florida State feels like when they get to that point in the year, they're set up for success. The entire feel when it comes to what they want to accomplish in 2023, they feel confident because of the culture that has now had some time to solidify. Like, you had a lot of guys do a lot of really good things last year. And the unfortunate reality in college football is whenever you have a really good season, typically those upperclassmen that go to the NFL. That's not the case for Florida State. They had a lot of guys that were younger last year that are still in that roster that are going to step into more of leadership roles this coming season. They've been really impressed so far with the way they've upheld that culture. Like, the older guys are showing the younger guys how to do it and then holding that standard up here. So all in all, it's only a few days in the fall camp, but they're very excited about where things stand right now for Florida State as it pertains to those few practices. Now, let's talk about the top dog, pun intended, the Georgia Bulldogs. Fall camp is rolling. Pretty similar operation to Alabama in the sense that you're not going to get a ton of insight into what's actually going on in-house, but we got some really great notes. If you haven't yet got a membership at Dogs HQ, would encourage you to do so. A lot of really more in-depth notes on what we're about to talk about right here that they have online there. But Dominique Lovett, transfer wide receiver, sounds like he's going to start in the slot from what we've heard. I mean, he has been electric all fall camp. He's one of those guys that when you're going through fall camp notes, you're trying to kind of sift through, okay, what's real, what's kind of just a passing note. Dominique Lovett, his name continues to get brought up. And in the world of fall camp notes, frequency, I think, is what we should really pay attention to. Dominique Lovett gets talked about, it seems like, every single fall camp report you look into with Georgia. So with him and Carson Beck now likely being that starting quarterback, you would imagine, they're going to have a vertical element to this offense that I don't know they really have had consistently at Georgia the last couple of years. Now, Stetson Bennett is a dog, Heisman finalist. We know this. But to add another weapon like Dominique Lovett, and to have Brock Bowers, and to have another year of Ladd McConkey, I'm very curious to see what this offense looks like passing-wise under Mike Bobo. Now, there's a battle at left tackle going on. You got Austin Blaske, who they feel like is maybe a little bit ahead in the pass pro side of things. And you got Ernest Green, and they love what he brings in the run game. There's a feeling that battle is going to wear on for a while and kind of let itself sort itself out, if you will. But those two guys are going back and forth left tackle position because the rest of the offensive line you feel pretty good about if you're a Georgia Bulldog fan. In terms of some young bucks, 5-star linebacker Raylan Wilson, his name keeps getting brought up. His name got brought up a lot leading into fall camp. His instincts, his athleticism, they feel like he's going to be a weapon for them at some point in time at Georgia. I'm curious to see how much burn he ends up getting when it comes to scrimmages and what group he's running with. Now, Justin Rhett, 4-star corner, 6 foot, 190 pounds. He has been a name that has gotten a ton of traction so far during fall camp. If you followed any social media accounts pertaining to Georgia football, you've seen pictures of practice, and you see Justin Rhett. Dude looks like a grown man. He does not look like a true freshman. And I'm excited to see how he factors in because the early enrollee piece is part of it. He's gotten some experience now during spring football. But also, he played his high school football at Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas, Nevada. And those of y'all that follow high school football closely, you know Bishop Gorman, they are one of the big dogs nationally when it comes to the high school level. He's played with and against some of the top talent. So I think from a adjustment style to the collegiate game, there's always going to be that for a true freshman, but you wonder how far ahead he is than the average Bear. But Justin Rhett, they've been excited about him, and I'm curious to see what he does when it comes to those scrimmages. They've been very encouraged with him, especially in those practices where you just have shoulder pads on. They feel like he's really trending the right way. So wouldn't you know it, Georgia has recruited top talent, and they're looking good in fall camp. So Kirby Smart doing what Kirby Smart does. Now, LSU probably made the most headlines when it comes to fall camp. They had a big old fight. The headline was, and there was no video of it, but the headline was, fight breaks out at LSU during fall camp. And the gut reaction from the football crowd, and I felt the exact same way until I talked to people closer to that situation, is, okay, good. Good. Competitive juices are flowing. That's what you want to see during fall camp. You want good on good. Iron sharpens iron. You want that competitiveness to bubble over until we got a little skirmish breaking out. Good. Because you go back to, was Joe Burrow and Patrick Queen, and they fought, and then they won a national title. This is not that same thing. Typically, a fight in practice is about 30 seconds, maybe a minute, and then you get broken up. Someone steps in between. A big lineman says, nope, we're not doing this anymore. Skilled players, y'all go back to your side of the football. Let's go and run it back. This was not that. This was a 4 to 5 minute, 20 on 20 from what I understand, full team just going back and forth. For a fight to go on for 4 to 5 minutes, that goes past the, this is competitive juices flowing. This is hey, we got to be disciplined. And Brian Kelly, it sounds like, was really upset with the way that this thing was handled. He was upset it wasn't broken up earlier. He was more upset with his team because they've had other fights internally, it sounds like, according to Mason Taylor. They've had a couple of fights here leading into this, and for this to bubble over and to go for an extended period of time, you had Malik Neighbors and Kyron Lacey that were told to go back to the locker room. You had Harold Perkins, who didn't take a snap the rest of the day. This was not a positive fight. This was a fight where it's hey, get control of yourself. Have some discipline. If we're fighting each other right now in fall camp, What's going to happen that first week of the season? You play Florida State, someone says something to you, you pop off, you lose a 15-yard penalty. Like, what happens then? It's about discipline. It's about culture. It's about standards. And a lot of people are going to, again, see this headline and say, oh, man, forget about that. It's just football. I'm a football guy. People are just being soft in the media. Like, you don't think Brian Kelly's a football guy? You don't think Brian Kelly's seen his fair amount of healthy fights, healthy competition within his team? Promise you he has. Brian Kelly coached a lot of football. And for him to be upset about this, I think that says everything we need to know about the feeling right now as it pertains to that fight at LSU. And so for Brian Kelly and company, I think this really can be a fork in the road. He told him, he's like, if we want to act like this, if we want to be undisciplined, y'all will win a game and lose a game for every one you win. You'll be a 500 team if that's how you want to act. But going back to that fork in the road, this can be that moment where you look in the mirror and say, what are we doing? We are way too talented to let practice go off the rails like this. So now you look to your leaders. I'm curious to see what the rest of the intel is out of LSU. Go and get a membership to Bengal Tiger on 3 to stay with everything LSU. Shea Dixon and company are doing an absolutely phenomenal job over there. But yeah, I'm curious to see what practice is like the rest of the way, because before that, it sounded like things were running really smoothly. It sounded like they were just feeling a lot more of they feel a lot more like they know what to expect from fall camp now, having had 1 year under the belt with Brian Kelly. Zy Alexander, transfer corner. Remember, they took a bunch of transfer cornerbacks. They feel like he might be the best one. They said he looks really good so far, and he's transferring from the FCS level up to the SEC, and he's hit the ground running. The quarterbacks both look great. Jaden Daniels, probably the best dual-threat quarterback in the country, not named Caleb Williams, but they really feel like Garrett Nussmeier. I mean, I talked to somebody that watched practice the other day. They said Garrett Nussmeier made some throws where you just go, all right now. There's a lot of programs across the country that would give their left arm and the L2 on their kickoff unit to have Garrett Nussmeier as their starting quarterback. So he's dropping jaws right now at fall camp. You feel pretty good about where you stand having a 1-2 punch at quarterback when it comes to that point. So they're figuring it out. They're getting things rolling now. They feel a lot better about where they were going into this season than they did last season, trying to figure it out on the fly. So LSU, fork in the road moment. I don't think the fight is anything to be overly concerned about, but it's definitely still a big thing to watch as we get into the rest of fall camp. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.